Wei Wuxian took the herbals according to the prescription, listened to the pharmacist's verbose instructions, and put the herbals into his arms carefully. But for some reason he didn't want to go back immediately. He didn't want to see Lan Wangji's injuries, nor did he want to see Lan Wangji's worried face. It was clearly Lan Wangji himself who was injured. Why did he look at him like that? Wei Wuxian recalled everything Lan Wangji had done for him these days, whether it was helping him practice or taking care of his daily life. The more he thought about it, the more depressed he became. Suddenly, he felt that no matter how good he was to Lan Wangji, he probably wouldn't be able to repay Lan Wangji's kindness to him. He was wandering around at cloud recesses like a ghost. Just like the day he just lost his memory, it was unknown how long he walked. When he looked up, he suddenly felt that the building in front looked familiar. He saw the word, "The Ancient Room," written on the plaque. Lan Wangji had led him to rediscover various places at cloud recesses previously. Wei Wuxian shook his head and thought about it, remembering that this place seemed to be a place used to store various valuable or special objects. These were originally nothing, but Wei Wuxian, who always thought himself of having a poor memory, remembered it at this moment. Lan Wangji seemed to have mentioned that when he lost control of his drunkenness, he used Wen's iron to burn that scar on his chest here. Wei Wuxian stood at the door for a while, raising his hand to cover his slightly aching heart silently. Then, suddenly, as if some switch had been pressed, he looked around for a while alertly, then reached out to hold the door lock on the heavy door. The disciple guarding looked at him warily as if he dared not speak. Wei Wuxian shrugged. The door lock was tricky, and he couldn't open it. However, this did not trouble Wei Wuxian. He bypassed the guarding disciple's sight easily, found a remote small window, pried open the window lock twice, pushed the window halfway, and got in. It was true that there were some old things inside, but because someone cleaned them regularly, there was not much dust accumulated. Wei Wuxian walked from the window slowly, looking around as he walked. He found the place where the Wen family's old belongings were stored, finally. He stood in front of those wooden cabinets which stood there for many years, and couldn't help but try to imagine Lan Wangji's mood when he stood here. But the soldering iron was nowhere to be found. It seemed that the scenery they too saw was very different after all. There was no brand on Wei Wuxian's body now, and he would never get another one for himself. He didn't even know why he didn't go back to accompany the injured Lan Wangji now, but insisted on coming to a place to stay in a daze. While he was lost in thought, he heard the sound of movements from the door of the ancient room suddenly. Wei Wuxian looked stern and prepared to find a place to hide reflexively. Then he saw that the person who opened the door and entered was not others but Lan Sizhui. "Senior Wei?" Lan Sizhui was confused when he saw him. Before he could ask him why he was here, Wei Wuxian asked him in advance, "Sizhui, what are you doing here?" Lan Sizhui was interrupted by him, having indeed forgotten the question he wanted to ask him. "I come to get something for Zhewu Jun." He pointed to a few calligraphy and paintings collected aside. Wei Wuxian raised his eyebrows and didn't ask any questions. He watched the teenager hold the calligraphy and painting in his arms carefully. He stepped forward and put his arms around Lan Sizhui's shoulders, suddenly saying, "Since we happen to meet each other, come and talk to me." Lan Sizhui did not have any doubt and said happily, "All right." Wei Wuxian thought for a moment and said, "Sizhui, how did Lan Zhan bring you up all those years?" Lan Sizhui didn't seem to expect that he would ask this question. He was stunned for a moment and then said, "My zither and sword skills were all taught by Hanguang-jun. What exactly does Senior Wei want to know?" Wei Wuxian touched his chin and said, "Anything is fine. I would like to know how Lan Zhan helped you dress clothes and pants." The teenager's face turned slightly red and he said, "Senior, I was already 5 years old at that time." Seeing Wei Wuxian's expression, which urged him to continue talking clearly, not just joking, he thought for a while carefully and said, "Before going to have classes with others, I went to Hanguang-jun every day, and he taught me how to read and practice calligraphy alone." "Well," Wei Wuxian said thoughtfully, "no wonder your handwriting is as same as Lan Zhan's." Lan Sizhui shook his head and said hurriedly, "Senior Wei, I just imitate Hanguang-jun. How can my handwriting has the charm of Hanguang-jun's?" The two of them left the ancient room together. Lan Sizhui locked the door and continued. "Not long after that, Hanguang-jun and I started practicing zither together. The first song we learned was Ask the Spirit." Wei Wuxian smiled. "This piece is not easy to play, but you learned it from the beginning?" Lan Sizhui said, I just learned the most basic 1 or 2 sentences in learning how to play it. I felt Han Guangjun's Ask the Spirit seemed to be a little different from others. Wei Wuxian was curious. Oh, Lan Sizhui explained, Ask the Spirit asks dead people who are strangers. Logically speaking, there should be no affection of the person who play it. At most, it is compassion. But the sound of Han Guangjun's zither is not like that. He scratched his head and said, I can't tell clearly. Wei Wuxian curled his fingers, lowered his eyes, and said casually, Maybe you will understand when you are older. Lan Sizhui continued, Later, Han Guangjun taught me swordsmanship. The teenager told the story between him and Han Guangjun, becoming more and more excited, almost beaming with joy. On the contrary, Wei Wuxian listened, but responded less and less. Finally, when Lan Sizhui talked about when he was 13, he couldn't help but interrupted him loudly. Sizhui, don't you give something to Wei Wuxian? The teenager patted his head, hugged the calligraphy and paintings he had taken, and hurried in another direction. Wei Wuxian was left alone, standing there blankly for a while. Then he punched a white wall next to him, hard suddenly. The poor wall made an innocent sound. Wei Wuxian put down his hand slowly and stood against the wall. His shoulders slumped, like a black cat soaked in the rain. He suddenly realized that the memories between him and Lan Zhan were so little. He knew that Lan Wangji was hurt because of him, but he didn't know how that person felt when he was hurt. He knew that Lan Zhan had raised Wen Yuan, but he didn't know every bit of it during those long years. He was now standing at cloud recesses. The white walls and black tiles of Gusu were extremely gentle. Lan Jingyi once told him with an envious look on his face that every brick and tile here contained memories of him and Lan Zhan. But now, he couldn't think of anything. The original memories were few enough. How could he afford to forget more? At that moment, he seemed to have figured out something suddenly. The depression in his heart in recent days disappeared suddenly, as if the clouds and mist in his heart were gone. The silent, flowing time was dyed with color suddenly. He took 1 step, 2 steps, and then started running, faster and faster. None of the passing disciples dared to remind him that he couldn't move fast at cloud recesses. They just stared blankly as he rushed back to the silence room crazily for some unknown reason. Wei Wuxian broke into the courtyard and pushed open the door of the inner room. He looked more like a robber than the owner of this place and rushed to the bedside in a hurry. Lan Wangji was pushed to lie down on the couch by him before, but now he didn't even get up. Seeing Wei Wuxian's anxious look before he could ask, Wei Wuxian caught his hand. He put 1 leg in the bed, leaned forward, and said very eagerly, Lan Zhan, let's practice. Lan Wangji was startled slightly. Wei Wuxian said firmly, I want to restore my memory. Now. Immediately. I must.